What's up guys? As you may recall from the video where we installed this fork, I had hinted at the idea of another modification to my Clash. And as you may have guessed, that is, we are going to install a coil shock today. I'm really excited to try it out. I do want to be honest up front, I really like the X2 and I'm not really sure that in this particular application, the coil is going to be the right choice for me. Nonetheless, let's slap this thing on and go test it out on the trail. We're also going to need to flip the chip on my Clash. It comes with a suspension kinematic change where you can flip from progressive to linear. So we're gonna make it more linear with this adjustment. All right, we officially have the coil shock installed. This is actually the Marzocchi Bomber that I've been using on my e-bike. Both bikes share the same eye to eye on the shock length, so I figured why not toss it onto the Clash and give it a shot. And now it perfectly matches the Marzocchi Bomber Z1 coil fork that we have installed up front. And we are trailside at DH Lago here in Vicenza, Italy. So let's go take a lap and see how this coil feels. We've done a couple laps now, that way we could get some clips for this video, and I can definitely see the benefits of having the coil shock in the rear. It feels like it is glued to the ground, and when I initially checked sag, it seems about right. However, I can bottom out pretty easily, especially when the bike is set in the sensitive setting. So I have a progressive spring. We're gonna slap that on now and do some more testing. I'm gonna swap out this 400-pound spring for a 450 to 550-pound progressive spring. It's simply the spring that I have, and I think it's gonna fit the bill nicely and get the job done. New coil spring installed. As you can see, the same one that's been on my e-bike. Let's go hit the trail and try it. Round 2, new coil. Let's get it. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, we just watched you ride down this part of the trail. Why are we watching it again? If you've ever tested suspension before, that's because it's best to hit the same piece of trail over and over while you try to get it dialed in, because you know exactly how your bike is feeling in that particular moment. I chose DH Lago in this section of trail because it has a great variety of smooth terrain as well as some chunky, more technical terrain, and it's got a bunch of different things I can hop off of along the way, so I can feel how the suspension feels as I'm progressing through the travel and that bottom out resistance that I'm getting in the shock. Which leads us in to one of the main issues with coil springs, and that is that you lose adjustability like you would get with an air spring. So I swapped this 450-pound spring on compared to the 400-pound spring, and right off the bat I could tell that sag was reduced significantly, but it wasn't terrible and it still rides pretty well. It's closer to my riding style than the 400-pound spring was. However, it's still a little bit too firm, and I wish that I could get through a little bit more travel, which means I have to go out and buy another spring in order to slap it on here. Additionally, because of using a coil fork and a coil spring on the shock, there's some new challenges I haven't had to face before, and that is the coil up front in the fork doesn't necessarily match the feel of the spring in the rear. With an air shock, you can make a couple PSI adjustments, 1, 2, 3 PSI, in order to get it dialed in. But in this particular scenario, you're just kind of stuck with what you have, and you just have to compromise and hope that you can get one of them close enough to something that you're happy with. So if you're a really particular rider, I definitely think you might want to steer clear of having a coil up front and a coil in the rear. However, if you're not too picky and you just want to have a good time and maximize your traction, then this is a great way to go. Which that leads us into the final concern that people will often have with a coil shock, and that is added weight. With the coil fork up front, the coil shock in the rear, full aluminum bike, downhill tire, this thing is heavy. Here's the weight for you. It was already heavy before the coil additions, but now, especially with the coil springs in there, it's no joke. It's a good ride though, super fun, and it blasts the downhills. So we've had quite the journey with my Commencal Clash. I've made a ton of upgrades to it, with my most favorite being the coil fork up front, and now getting to test out the coil shock in the rear. It's been a ton of fun. However, I actually have some big and exciting news coming up that's going to be in the next video, and I think you guys are going to be pretty surprised by it. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where to ride next.